If you're an American traveler planning a trip for summer 2026 and beyond, and if you've been paying any attention to the news, to social media, if you've been following other videos on YouTube, then you've probably already heard about the EES. That's the EU Entry and Exit System, and it is different, by the way, from ETIAS, ETIAS, which I have another video about, and I will link to both in the video description, and I'll put a card up here. And it's also separate from the UK ETA. Similar, but different, and I'll make sure to link that video both here on a card and then in the description as well, because even if your final destination isn't the UK, just a heads up, you still might need to fill out an ETA if you're transiting through certain airports in the United Kingdom, which could include London, Belfast, Manchester, etc. You just have to check. It depends on which country you're coming in from, where your final destination is, and then which airports you're transiting through. So it's going to be a couple of years of flux for travelers from the US, and I want to make it as simple as possible for you. Typically, my videos tend to reach Americans who like to travel, which also includes my travel agents and future travel agents, so travelers who are thinking about becoming travel agents, and people who have become travel agents. So if you are just learning more about travel as a trade, or if you're considering travel as an industry, I have tons of other videos on my channel for you. Hi, by the way, my name is Brittany. I'm the founder of Travel Agent Haven. I've been a travel agent myself since 2020. Since then, I've helped my team of travel agents sell, I think, over $8 million now in travel, and that's not including affiliate marketing commissions, MLM, money, whatever, any of that. That's just straight up travel sales. And I say that because unfortunately, people use big numbers to market and things. But I know you're not here for that, so let's get into the EES. As I mentioned in the intro, the EES stands for the EU Entry and Exit System, and the whole goal of it is to simplify and streamline travel, both inbound and outbound, for non-EU travelers. EU stands for the European Union. I have another video that's either coming out right before or after this one that's really breaking down all these terms we hear about all the time, like EU, Schengen area, EEA, and then all the other acronyms I've mentioned so far. So stay tuned for that one. If you know that you're learning about this, you're going to be traveling soon, go ahead and subscribe and then click that little bell so you never miss notifications of when a video is posted. However, if this is your first time watching me and you don't feel I've earned your subscribe yet, no worries. My goal is to do that. So what do you actually need to know about the EES? Well, it's immediately relevant because it went into effect in mid-April of 2026. So if you're watching this in real time, then it's definitely immediately relevant to you. It's been causing all kinds of delays across several airports in Europe, and some countries have even decided to just scrap it, at least temporarily, ahead of the busy summer season. Greece being one of those countries, they've decided, you know what, we're just going to put a pause on this and we'll revisit that after things have calmed down a little bit. As US citizens, we have enjoyed an enormous amount of passport privilege, and we've basically been able to travel visa-free to all countries within the Schengen area. When we think of different countries across Europe, I usually like to tell travelers from the US that the Schengen area is comprised of those countries that are really easy to move between just because of where they are in relation to each other. So for example, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, you can go to and through several of these countries in just one day by taking the train. So it's easy to hop between them. But just because they're easy to get to, that does not necessarily mean that they're within the Schengen area. So I do recommend taking at least a few minutes and really familiarizing yourself with which countries are in the Schengen area. I'll be sure to list those down in the video description, and I'll list to other places where you can maybe save them, bookmark them, and maybe even share them with your client just so they know what's going on. But your question might be why? We've enjoyed this visa-free travel for so long, what's happening? You might be sad to hear that passport stamps are going away, and in fact, in many countries they already have. Their goal is speed, efficiency, and security. They're trying to move people through border control as quickly as possible. And the way to do this is for us non-EU travelers, including US citizens, to do authorization in an automated way, either in advance or right before we enter the country. It's harder to fake a digital footprint than it is a physical passport stamp. So that's one of the reasons they're doing it, is to ramp up security. It's also extremely efficient. We have a limit of how many days we can be in the Schengen area before we have to leave. And we also have a limit of how many days we can spend in the Schengen area per year. For example, we as US citizens can remain in the Schengen area for up to 90 days, which includes the days we're entering and exiting, within a 180-day period. 180 days is 6 months. So this is really important to know if you're planning a longer trip yourself, if you're a digital nomad or you're helping a digital nomad with travel. travel. For most people, this won't really apply because Americans typically don't get that much time off anyway. And they're typically traveling between 7 to 10 to 14 days, maybe 3 weeks max for most vacations. But if you do happen to be traveling for a longer period of time, or if you're helping someone who is, then one thing you can do is just plan the order of the countries so that you're not hitting the max for any of these. So let me just give you an example of how this could go. Say you're a US citizen, and you might not know this, but we can be in the UK for up to 6 months without having to extend on some other special kind of visa, which is fun to know, right? So in theory, you could go to the Schengen area and you could spend up to 90 days there. Usually I tell people try to shoot for a couple of days fewer than that, just because if something happens, a flight gets canceled, you're not overstaying what that agreement is on accident, right? So try to give yourself at least a few days as buffer, if not a whole week or more. So say you stay within the Schengen area for 80 days, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to go to the UK, I'm going to stay there for up to 6 months. So you do that, and now you've been out of the Schengen area for at least 6 months, and if you want, you can re-enter the Schengen area. Now I know I'm not talking to everybody here, but I'm just sharing these notes in case you happen to be someone who travels often for work, my content creators, digital nomads, freelancer people, or just for someone who's maybe planning a longer stay. I do know some travel agents who are helping people plan gap years or gap multiple years, who are helping with relocation. So these are really important things for them to know. Another trick around this, while still following the rules, is also looking for non-Schengen area countries in addition to the UK. I just use that one as an example because Americans can stay there for so long. But you could also go to Ireland. They are a member of the EU, but they're not in the Schengen area. So actually, because Ireland is right next to the UK, you could spend 90 days in the Schengen, spend up to 6 months in the UK, and then hop right over to the Republic of Ireland and be there. And you can actually be in Ireland for up to 90 days. So you could really have this whole planned out thing where you, in theory, hop around for like a year or more. Now, I'm not recommending that to everybody, but I do think it's cool. I've always been really fascinated with this kind of stuff because it's a way to be compliant and yet still game the system, which is just fun for you to know. But it's also good for you to know because you might get the question. And I mean, goodness, if you are watching this and you're either thinking about becoming a travel agent or you already are a travel agent, if you can get one of these clients who's booking a year or more of travel, that's going to be an amazing commission for you. I actually have a travel agent who just booked a client on a round the world cruise for a year. And I think she's going to be making $6,000 this year just from that. Pretty nice. Now, the reason that the EES is in the news right now, aside from the fact that it's new, I mentioned before, there are delays happening. And I think that especially with people who don't travel often, it's really easy for any kind of kink in their plans, any kind of unknown, to make them freak out a little bit. And it's understandable. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've never gone outside of the country. You're finally traveling Europe this summer, or you're going to multiple countries within Europe, and you're like, oh my gosh, of course this is happening just before my trip. Now, you do want to look at your layover and connection times and make sure that you're going to have enough of a buffer. But I'm also finding, just from talking to people who are over in Italy and Greece right now, that there's a lot of grace here. They want to move people through as quickly as possible. That's the whole reason they decided to implement the EES in the first place. And it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. If you've been to the UK within the last several years, then you've noticed they have an automated border entry. And as someone who travels frequently and to the UK frequently, it's awesome. It is so nice and easy. You get to one of these kiosks. In fact, you've probably seen these also when coming into the United States. You come in, you take off your glasses if you have them. This little camera kind of adjusts to meet you, and then it takes a picture. You slide your passport onto the screen. It takes a picture. It verifies your photo with the passport. It also is able to verify when is the first day you entered the Schengen area in this example, and then what's the last day you're leaving, just to make sure you haven't overstayed, and also that you're not exceeding 90 days within that 180-day period. So actually, it's going to make things a lot faster, but because people are just not used to it, and also because people are so tired, especially after transatlantic flights, it's going to take some getting used to. But the nice thing is, you do it once, and it's valid for 3 years from the date when you first set it up. So the good thing is, if you're going to be traveling to or through Europe as an American more than once throughout a 3-year period, the only annoying part is really just the first time when you're setting all of this up. And then once you're in the system, it's going to recognize you. I've had this happen to me with the UK. Another thing about this that has people on edge is the mandatory biometrics. And it's understandable. Some people are uncomfortable getting their irises scanned, which is what's happening when you have that camera meeting your eye. And some people are even uncomfortable with getting their fingerprints scanned. Unfortunately, the biometrics are mandatory. There is no way to go around this. And if you are not willing to provide your biometrics upon entry, then your entry will be denied. So that is something to consider. If that's something that's really important to you, then you will want to consider alternative destinations. Most major airports that expect and anticipate loads of traffic from non-EU travelers like Paris, CDG, now have kiosks set up for this, but every airport and several different countries are handling this a bit differently. And I also just want to highlight, because I did mention the Schengen versus the EU. The EU stands for the European Union. The Schengen area is a group of countries where you can experience travel without going through passport control between them. So I gave you the example of you can travel between Paris, France and Amsterdam, Netherlands, and you don't have to go through border control. So they have a specific agreement between those countries. But the EES is specifically for the EU. So I just want to clarify that. Now, a quick note about the biometrics. There is some conflicting information on the main website about EES and ETIAS. It states that you only need biometrics if you plan to use the automated system with the kiosks, but you might still be able to enter if you go through the manual route with a person. Again, it's in flux. This could absolutely change, so I will make sure to include any and all updates in the video description below with links to the original sources so you can go and check for yourself, which I always recommend. Always do your due diligence. There's a lot of information and misinformation floating around right now on YouTube, social media, and especially TikTok, so I wanted to clarify what's true and what's not true in a really quick rapid fire round. The EES is active now as of April 2026. The ETIAS right now is scheduled to launch in late 2026, although that could change. The EES, the one that's active right now, is totally free. There's no charge. The ETIAS, which is due to launch in late 2026, will cost €7, which is about $8 to $10 US. The EES is going to be done at the border when you enter the EU as a non-EU traveler. The ETIAS is done online before you fly. It's very similar to the UK ETA, which I mentioned I also have a video about. So I would highly recommend going and watching that one if you know you're going to be going to or through the UK this summer, even if you're just going to be transiting through one of their airports. Here's the big takeaway. If you are traveling in summer of 2026, you don't have to do any kind of prep work before you leave. You just want to make sure that your passport is going to be valid for at least 6 months after the last day of travel. Some of the kiosks and scanners for the EES are saying at least 3 months, but the reason that I'm saying 6 months is because certain countries have pickier passport control. So I would just make sure that your passport doesn't expire until 6 months after your last day to travel, just to be safe. Now, some countries are rolling out some kind of pre-registration process, and each country, unfortunately, is making different decisions. So like I mentioned before, Greece has decided to pause EES for UK travelers. So I want to make sure I specify that. For Americans, as of when I'm recording this, it is still valid. So if you're going to Greece this summer or anytime, just make sure that you're allowing time for that, especially if you're going to be transiting through. I always recommend giving yourself a minimum of 3 hours for an international layover. And I've had people give me pushback on that because they're like, oh, really? The other country's just like an hour away. Yes, but that's assuming everything goes to plan, right? What if your initial flight is delayed? That alone can mess you up, right? Or what if it's just busy? I have definitely queued for up to 90 minutes going into countries like Greece and Croatia. So I would highly recommend always give yourself more time than you think you'll need. The 90-180 rule is now automated, and if you mess it up and if you overstay, it will flag you immediately. You're not going to have any more nice border guards just giving you a stamp and saying you're good to go. You really have to stay on top of it and make sure you're not overstaying anything. If you're worried about missing your connection or anticipating delays, then again, just try to give yourself a little more buffer time if possible. I understand if you already booked your flights and you have a tight connection, then it might not be possible to change anything, but here are a few tips to be able to help travel go faster and more smoothly for you. Number one, if you haven't picked your seat yet, try to sit in front of the plane. The faster you can deplane plane and get off of the aircraft, the quicker you can get to passport control, do your thing, and move through. That's especially important if you have a tight connection and it's not possible to give yourself more buffer time. If you can, try not to check bags. I know this is hard for so many people, but I've only ever checked a bag on a transatlantic flight once, and I've gone to Europe so many times. So you can do it. You really can. If you're really strategic, if you don't overpack, and if you can do a carry-on only deal for your flight, it's going to be so much faster for you. And even going beyond that, if you can do carry-on only and you can sit towards the front of the plane, and if you're traveling with one other person, you can make it so that you're both sitting in aisle seats so that either one of you who's available can get your luggage ready. As soon as the crew allows you to, you can get that stuff and be ready. Now, I know this is sometimes frowned upon. If you're sitting in an aisle seat, sometimes even if it's not your row's quote-unquote turn to go, they will let people in the aisle seats clear out if they have carry-on only because it's faster. If you have a really tight connection, like an hour or less, see about sitting in the front. But don't leave this to chance. Don't just wait until the last minute and not reserve a specific seat or leave it up to the kindness of the flight attendant, because maybe multiple people are going to be having tight connections, right? So I would just really take care of this yourself and go ahead and reserve that seat in your airline flight app if you can. Another thing to ease your fears is that these countries and the EU in general, they understand that there's going to be a transitional period. So for the first 6 months, there's going to be a lot of grace. We know the airlines and the airports themselves are going to be working out many kinks. So don't feel too stressed out about this. It's going to be fine. And if you do happen to miss your flight due to a delay, I always recommend this anyway, booking directly with the airlines, which is just good advice to keep in mind for the future. I know it sounds funny coming from a travel agent, but I always tell my clients to book their own flights. So booking directly with the airlines is good for multiple reasons. One, if you're with the same airline and you miss your second leg, they can often rebook you onto a later flight going to that same final destination at no cost to you. I've had that happen to me before. And this is especially true if there's a flight delay with that whole aircraft and everybody arriving is late. Some airports will even hold flights. Like Iceland does this all the time. They're notorious for having some flights leave late, but it's actually a kindness, because if someone is coming from another flight and they're delayed, they want to make sure that they don't miss their transatlantic flight, right? So just communicate to the flight attendants if you're scared about missing your connection, or if you're just nervous or anxious. It's totally understandable. Ask the flight attendants for advice, ask the gate agents for advice before you fly. I really hope this was helpful. If so, could you do me a favor? Could you hit like? It really does help YouTube know that this video was valuable, and it will help YouTube push this out to other people who need this information. If you're interested in learning more about working in travel, hosting group trips yourself, becoming a travel agent, then I would love to help you. I have loads more videos for you. You can hit subscribe to learn more about that. Or if you're just watching for the travel tips, I have a whole playlist about insider travel tips from travel agents, and also I have playlists where I've organized certain videos depending on what you need. So if you're an American traveler going to the UK, going to Europe, check the playlist this is on and go see if you need to watch those other videos. I'm also happy to answer any questions you have. You can drop any questions you have here in the comments if you don't mind asking it publicly, or if you'd rather ask your question in private, you can send me a DM on Instagram over at Travel Agent Haven. I'll be sure to put that QR code up on the screen, but if for some reason it doesn't show up or there's some weird error, just find Travel Agent Haven on Instagram and send me a DM there. Thanks so much for being here, and I wish you the best flight and the most pleasant trip whenever you go.